Hey everybody, hi tarot community. I am doing a quick live because I just find it easier doing live. I know it's crazy, but I guess it's the single mother in me. It's just like down and dirty. Let's just get it done and do it. Um, this is the purpose of this video is to talk to you about how I went from being someone who was very much a beginner to someone who is now a professional tarot reader. Now, I have purchased my first tarot deck when I was 20. I've read tons of tarot books through the years, but it wasn't until I really started to focus intensely on tarot that things started to change. And a couple of things that made a significant difference for me, going from someone who, although I, knew all the basic things about tarot with respect to, the major arcana and the minor arcana, that's a ding and it's distracted me. My apologies. Although I know those basic things and I had read my books and I went through everything, I'm 50. Hi, how are you? Basically, things have changed. So when I started to actually force myself to do readings for people was when things started to make a significant difference. And when I started to sort of make connections between the cards and look at them then everything made a huge difference for me. So, so basically, what I found was that it's utilizing not just what you know with respect to all the different cards. It's also utilizing your intuitive sense and really sort of trusting that. Trust is a huge element for when you are starting to read the tarot. And initially, you're always second guessing yourself. And for me, a couple of books made a significant difference. The Tarot Interactions book, which I've discussed before in another reading. Obviously, there are a ton of really great books out there that discuss, what all the cards mean. And I think, going through those, learning those, you really need to have a good, solid understanding of the cards. And part of my process to really understanding the cards was engaging with them on a really personal level and getting to know each card individually. I did that on an intuitive way for one winter with a friend where we would just pull the cards and just sort of look at them and engage with them together, and sort of, it was like a play in a sense. And then I started doing a lot of really intense reading, really getting to know the cards, really connecting with them, so that my understanding of the cards became on a really visceral level, as opposed to not just mental, intellectual. I know that a lot of people probably get a lot of help with respect to having cue words with that. And I think that's great if that sort of, gets you to sort of understand them. But I think you need to really get into understanding the essence of the card, really what that card's about, so that when you look at it, it just hits you. And so when my understanding of the cards really hit me on that level, that's when I started to really make those intuitive connections. So becoming professional for me was about I guess the best way I can describe it is when the, sort of rote meaning of the cards was not as important as what I knew about that meaning with respect to that client intuitively. So this is where I think the two things work together: the intellectual aspect of understanding what the card means and the intuitive aspect, so that you trust your intuition so much that you allow that meaning to kind of, I call it sort of molding and shifting into what the situation is. So the the specific meaning of that card is a subtle shift based on what I feel is intuitively sort of meant to interpret it, to interpret for that client. So, and that's when things started to really, really change. And then starting to sort of look at how all the cards interacted together, which is where I found that book of Tarot Interactions so helpful and so beneficial, was when those things started to really work together. And I started to see how the cards interconnected. And so for me, that was how things really, really changed. So that now I, and my level of trust in myself and in my intuition. So where I used to be reading and go, oh God, is this, I would second guess myself, or I wouldn't want to say that. Now I don't. I have complete and utter trust in, my skills and my abilities when I'm laying the cards out. Absolutely, there are times where you'll lay things out and you'll go, what is this? Everyone has those moments. Sometimes things don't connect, and that's just the way it is. But what I find oftentimes is that if you can sit with that, if you can look at that, that's when I start asking questions of my clients, because generally there's something up here. So, and don't be afraid to do that. I used to sort of think that, I was like a performing monkey, that I always had to be, on stage and I was being perpetually tested. And there are people for whom that is the case, where they're coming to you. It's a very cynical thing. And, they're trying to see, like, whether or not you are legitimate, right? And you get that. But don't let that affect you. I mean, you go about your reading and do what you are, and don't let that inhibit you from asking the questions that you feel are relevant. So for me, if I'm reading something and I really want to have some clarification and I know that I'm onto something, I may need to say, so does this have to do with or even particularly with core cards is a prime example, because sometimes you're not necessarily sure whether or not that person is a male or a female, but the situation or the connection or the dynamic between the individuals is such that you describe that. And usually I'll get clarification from someone at that point. Is that a male or a female? Or people will oftentimes offer that information up. They'll go, no, I know who that person is. That's so-and-so, or that's my friend, or whatever. And they understand the relationship because you're describing what that dynamic, what the situation is in the context of that reading. So it's amazing how those things come out. I have, just to give you a prime example, I've had readings where people have been very, very kind of cautious and skeptical and holding a lot back. But during the course of the reading, they, with the confidence that you provide, and just going about saying the things, the reading through the cards, they really open up and they become quite engaged in the process with you. And the way in which my philosophy of reading cards is that it really is an interactive experience. It's not me doing this, it's us doing this. So it is us engaging with the cards together. So I'm in some ways an interpreter, is what I feel. So I have the skills to interpret, and to talk someone through that. And someone else, the client is part of that whole process as well. So they're listening to that, but they're also engaging back, so that together we are making sense of what is being laid out. Because for me, tarot is the tool and the voice of spirit. I really firmly believe that. I believe that spirit utilizes whatever it can to get its messages across to us, because oftentimes we struggle to kind of listen to what they have to say. So they utilize whatever they can. And particularly when someone comes to you for a reading, I believe that at that point, spirit is absolutely saying, okay, we've got someone who can, offer up some information, and we've been dying to tell, our person something, and they utilize that as a means to kind of, provide them with the information they perhaps have been trying to sort of get across to that person for a long time. So for me, I really firmly believe that it is spirit saying, listen, we need to sort of utilize this. So because I believe that, I believe so strongly and inherently in the messages that are being given. And to me, they are always messages that have a higher purpose. And so when I approach things from that perspective, it is not so much about whether or not, am I psychic? Am I not psychic? Am I on track or I'm not? It's more like, this is true because this is coming from a higher place. And okay, so maybe my interpretation, as my translation perhaps is a better way to say it, may not be up to par all the times, but the message is always correct. So basically for me, how things really changed for me was when, one, I trusted myself. Two, when I internalized the understanding and meaning of the cards. And three, when I just went out and did it. There are a million courses out there. In fact, I think every single tarot reader that I have come across has on their website a course that they're offering you to take. Trust me, this is for them a way to make money. And I'm sure their courses are great. And if that works for you and their approach is something that is helpful for you, by all means, pay them, take the course, go do it. But I guarantee you that no amount of courses you take are going to be as beneficial as when you just finally do it for yourself. The real learning comes in the actual practice and the doing of it. So that means sitting down and actually engaging and doing readings for people. That is where the things really open up for you. And you go from being a beginner and someone who is just really kind of struggling to get through and really make sense of things, to being that professional tarot reader who is providing a reading that is, cohesive and complete and has, depth and insight and meaning going on there, and people make real connections. And finally, for me, my approach to reading is one that is about insight. Because for me, that's what this is about. It's about providing a client insight, not just into the future, because everyone wants to know the future. Will this happen? Will that happen? Whatever. But for me, it's also about providing insight into what's happening to them at the moment right now. And maybe, how that might translate into the future. Because the future is changeable. I mean, it is a probable future, but it is also changeable. Things can happen and the direction of where they're heading can change based on what the choices that people make in their lives. And I feel very strongly that oftentimes what my role is to really um, bring those more positive, supportive messages across. I try to kind of leave the reading on a positive note that people have, a sense of hopefulness for where things are going. Even those readings that are, that have some really heavy stuff in there, a lot of shadow work. There's always some positive aspect and light that can be brought about that can provide people with that sense that they have a means to kind of move on, move forward, and utilize their resources. And because that is what I feel that my role is. I feel there's that my role as the consultant is to allow them to gain some strength and meaning and insight into the tarot and into where things are going. So, if I can leave you with one real tip that was crucial for me into becoming professional, it was to actually take that leap of faith of trust and take that leap of faith of doing. So trust in yourself and just go out and do it. And believe that the things that you have to say do have value, because I know that they do. They truly do. And that made all the difference in the world in terms of what I had to offer and my readings. Anyways, that may just be completely confusing, all the things that I said, but hopefully there's a bit of insight in that for you. I don't purport to have any great, knowledge about things. Just my experiences with working on these things and my life experiences that have also influenced my intentions and understanding of tarot. And finally, the last thing that made a significant difference for me going from a beginner to a professional was I created a tarot deck. Now, not everyone has the time or the inclination to do that, but just to give you, just to let you know that even the process of me having to look intensely at a card and figure out how what would I do if I was going to create this card. I went out into the world on the internet, looked at a multitude of, free pictures, and I had to kind of make connections. And that was brilliant because it made me look at images. It made me look at situations and think, well, I wonder what tarot card that would fit. And I started to look at the world in that way, just generally. I would look at things and say, I wonder what tarot card that situation is. And just in doing that was a means of really internalizing the understanding of a card and also the understanding of the symbolisms. I picked up a book that had a lot of discussion around the esoteric symbolisms, particularly in the Rider-Waite-Smith, which, because it comes from the Golden Dawn, it really utilizes a lot of those. And I think today a lot of people don't necessarily have that sort of understanding of these occult symbolisms and knowledge. So by looking at that sort of a little bit more intensely and sort of seeing how those things sort of played out within each individual card, that was also helpful as well, because then you sort of understand also a little bit more in depth into the cards, what they mean. And it's about going deeper, ultimately. It's about going deeper than just the surface aspect of the cards. So when you do that, you just are adding more and more levels of understanding to the card and consequently to a situation for someone. And the last thing I want to say is, if your intuition is telling you something and it goes against perhaps what you know to be the intellectual understanding of a card, the intuition always wins. And for me, has been the absolute truth. So the intuitive piece will always win out for me over the intellectual piece, because that in the end is where, that the messages from spirit are really coming through, is that because it's telling you internally what is, I believe, the truth of the situation. So that's been my experience. Anyways, I'm going to cut this short because it's getting really long. And like the video, please subscribe, because I am trying to, build some knowledge base here for people and connect with everyone and let you know a little bit more about me, about my process, my experience, and this journey that I'm on building this business, which is interesting and fun and crazy. And hopefully you'll have an insight and go along with me in this whole experience and we can learn together. So anyways, thank you for watching, and talk to you later.